there was a clip of Hilary Clinton that we talked about, where she had equated Ukraine, or the potential for Russia to meet a similar fate in Ukraine as they did in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And we talked about how this is, problematic, because you don't want the U.S. to perceive this war in Ukraine as a mechanism to undermine Russia, because it comes at the expense of the lives of human beings.
Because think of the incentive structure, the elongation of a conflict. If you have people in power thinking this way, and I think the reason that Hilary Clinton was going on Maddow's show at that time was to get the attention to some of the people in the Biden White House. Like, this is an opportunity to really weaken Putin here. And it's just an insight into like the sociopathic way that a lot of our powerful actors in the U.S. government view some of these conflicts as proxies for their own particular interests. The people on the ground be damned. And now we're seeing it's just a blank check, really, in terms of weapons going into Ukraine, which I'm sure those same ghouls are happy about.
Yes, well, and they're the ones who are offering that blank check. And Chomsky has during my brief COVID convalescence, Chomsky was making waves by talking about this problem, where the United States did not, from his perspective, do everything it could to diffuse the situation. At the same time, recognizing that Putin is to blame for this situation. It is just a question of what would be the U.S. reaction to this. Would it do everything it could to minimize death and destruction, or would it contribute to the extension of the conflict as a way of diminishing Russia? With all that said, there's another element here, and that is the agency of Ukraine. And this is the dilemma, I think, on some level, that we face on the left, and particularly, the folks who have a problem with imperialism, because this is no doubt Russian imperialism. There's also Western imperialism that is involved in here. It's just one that is a little bit softer, and it is softer. And the question is, what do you do in this situation? Because should the United States use its power to force the Ukrainians to surrender and essentially give up their autonomy and their own agency to the Russian government? And or I guess the other option is the United States does nothing, does not provide weaponry, which I think, I think it's probably closer to where I would land, or at least not this much weaponry, because it is going to, could potentially extend this conflict on and on. And I'm very sympathetic to and understanding of initial weaponry being given and what we did at the beginning. But now we're at a point where we have to have a real legitimate conversation about the flood of weapons going in there. And Germany's now joining in after international pressure. There are forces behind the scenes. You have like the front facing ghouls like Lindsey Graham, but there are forces behind the scenes like the Hillary Clinton clip that Sam is describing here, who want this to extend. And, to not be conscious of that is ignorant. Yeah, and I honestly don't know what the solution here is. I do know that the more weapons we provide to anybody in any conflict, regardless of how just it may be perceived at any given time, means that we're going to be providing weapons to other conflicts that we all agree is completely unjust. Mm-hmm. And so it's a dilemma. It is really a dilemma. And if we are talking of, if the compulsion to provide, and I'm not saying that the Ukrainians shouldn't do everything they can to get weapons. That is up to them. The question is, what do we do with our government? And what should our government be providing? And if we're genuinely concerned about the death and the oppression of people, we have the opportunity to mitigate death and oppression in Afghanistan and in Yemen by not providing weapons, but by just simply, pulling back on some things or giving money. I mean, it's one of the things they recommend if you want to earn more money, you want to invest money and get a good rate return, pay off your credit cards, because all of a sudden you're not going to be paying out 15%. And that's money that you will have earned, essentially, will accumulate for you. We have that opportunity, similar, analogous opportunity with Yemen, for instance, or with Afghanistan, by simply releasing money to them and avoiding a lot of death and destruction. So I think it's a far more nuanced question. And I don't know if I know necessarily the answer where we draw the line in terms of how much weaponry we provide for Ukraine.
But there has to be a line. There has to be one.
I would imagine so. I just don't know how you said it. I really don't. I don't know how you said it. Do you set it and say, like, okay, well, you will lose the cities in the east. You'll lose Odessa. You'll lose Mariupol. But you retain Kyiv. I don't know.
It's not that 1-to-1, right?
I mean, I don't know how you establish. You
can't, but you have to do it within the context of brokering like larger peace negotiations. But at the same time, as you say, it's difficult because this is about Ukrainian agency, and that's what we should be promoting, I guess. Conservatives, like in the clip that maybe we're about to play, are less interested in that, unless you want to move on.
Well, no, let's play this clip here. That was all going to be an introduction to it, but let's play it from here. Rand Paul is questioning Secretary of State Tony Blinken at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing, and this is like I say, there is a nuanced argument about the role the United States and the West is playing here in terms of extending this conflict. But none of that requires justifying, and even people, like I say, like Chomsky, even that guy Chaz Freeman, that Chomsky cited, none of them excused or in any way diminished the responsibility that Russia and Putin has for launching this war. But I give you Rand Paul.
Had they been, or are they to become part of NATO, that means U.S. soldiers will be fighting in Ukraine, and that's something I very much oppose.
Senator, could I just say to that, because look, these are important conversations and arguments. My judgment is different. If you look at the countries that Russia has attacked over the last years, Georgia, leaving forces in Transnistria and Moldova, and then repeatedly Ukraine, these were countries that were not part of NATO. It has not attacked NATO countries for probably a very good reason.
You could also argue the countries they've attacked were part of Russia.
Well,
we're part of the Soviet Union.
Yes, and I firmly disagree with that proposition. It is the fundamental right of these countries to decide their own future and their own destiny. And
I'm not saying it's not, but I'm saying that the countries that have been attacked, Georgia and Ukraine, were part of the Soviet Union.
And that does not give
they were
Russia
part
the
of
right
the
to attack
Soviet
them.
Union since the 1920s.
But that does not give Russia the right to attack them. On the contrary,
no one's saying it does, but it really has nothing to do
from being part of this empire by force.
I mean, he is saying that.
Yes.
Like, why bring it up?
That was literally Putin's justification for his invasion of Ukraine, and it's been
But it was, I think, like
time and time again.
Putin's was more specifically that it was part of Greater Russia, the Russian Empire,
right,
as opposed to the Soviet Union. But I mean, you know, really not very different from Rand Paul's argument,
except that Rand Paul wants to say Soviet because he wants to make it a Red Scare thing too.
I mean, wasn't Texas part of Mexico? I mean, weren't
we part of Great Britain?
Yeah, the War of 1812. I guess we have to just be like, you guys go for it in DC. Back to 13 colonies for us.
I think. I mean, why don't we just bring back the Ottoman Empire, right?
I mean, it really does open the door to a lot of complications. I mean, how far back on the map are we willing to go here? To justify these attacks. It is just bizarre to me.
Well, I think that's an instructive clip on the limits of the anti-war conservative, and by limits I mean the complete abject immorality of their positions and why they're not real allies in an anti-imperialist, anti-war fight. And two, it's also interesting that he's gone back to this because Republicans like Trump and others started with, you know, we don't really care. Russia can do what they want. It was polling badly. They walked it back a bit. Maybe now that the dust is settled, they're re-engaging in that rhetoric. Who knows?
It is, yeah. It's interesting to see where they're all landing on this. One of those guys was J.D. Vance.